and welcome back to S.P.L.I.F. with your host, Vaughn. S.P.L.I.F. stands for Spiritual Perspectives of Life, Interconnections, and Fuckery with Vaughn. So thanks so much for those who are coming back, and I'm super excited for this episode. It's gonna be a little I'd say heavy. If you're not in the space for that, I would suggest tuning out. It is going to be over grief, trauma, and healing a damaged soul. And there's always going to be a weight when you're talking about emotions and grief and trauma and the whole process of healing, because the process of healing is uncomfortable and it's heavy. Before we dive into this episode, I wanted to do a brief explanation of something that was brought to my attention from the last episode. So I've worked in the therapeutic field for about half a year and studied psychology a little bit. Just took a couple classes, not full on psychology, and have been in therapy myself, and I've done a lot of stuff around therapeutic environments. And in my last episode, I referenced that I had ADHD and that I was self-diagnosed and not actually diagnosed. And it was brought to my attention that that can be seen as incredibly insensitive to those who are diagnosed and struggle with it every day. I did not say that to mock anyone, and I did not say that to get views or anything like that. I do feel like I fall in line with a lot of those symptoms, but I also understand that I haven't went to see a professional about it, and it's never been a conversation with the therapist that I've seen before, because we just mostly talked about what was going on with my mental state, not that I have a hard time processing and thinking through things and stuff like that. So yeah, I just wanted to apologize. I'm sorry that if that offended anyone, and I'll refrain from saying anything regarding that in the future. So let's dive right into what healing journey looks like. Wow, that's a vague statement. The healing journey looks different for every person, and I don't feel like the journey ever stops. I think we have I would think of a river. A river has these crazy, massive, tumbling currents at times, which is the hard parts in your life, or the hard parts of healing the trauma or the spirit. And it has really stagnant spots where the water just stays or it just spins really softly. And that's kind of what the healing journey is. This is going to be an issue the whole episode. Healing journey is, and it really does look different for everyone, and everyone's going to be moving on it at their own pace. And I think there's people out there who think that they don't need to heal anything, that they're safe the way that they are, and I would disagree, but if that's how you feel, that's okay. I think that we all should aim to try and heal, because if we don't, we can get stuck in our traumatic cycles and often seek out the same form of a cycle, or we can be stuck in fight or flight mode, and all of that stuff impacts our daily life and impacts our relationship with others, whether it's friendship, whether it's family, or it's a relationship. And it keeps us from our purpose and reduces our life expectancy. When we don't heal our trauma and we don't face the things that we went through, it weighs on our body and our spirit in different ways. And so it's just, I find it super important to really bring advocacy for healing. And it doesn't have to happen when you're my age at 27, and it doesn't have to happen wait until you're 60. I feel like my mom and my dad are perfect examples of people who heal later in life. I mean, I'm sure that they've healed continuously through life, not just healing, but I've seen like such a huge transformation for them from the past, like, I would say the past like 5 years, really even just the past 2 years, how much that they have changed and grown and healed the different parts of their soul, even if they're not in therapy. So I also want to emphasize you don't have to be in therapy to heal. It is a great tool to have and use, and I'm a huge advocate for it, though currently I do not have a therapist because insurance sucks. However, I'm working on that and finding one that is affordable. There are so many ways that we can heal. And to me, I try to heal through therapy, through spiritual alignment and guidance, and through things like that connect with my soul and my purpose, such as art. And I have two very beautiful pieces of art behind me. And one of them is a picture of my sister-in-law's beautiful spirit of how I see it, and the other is how I see my spirit. And the yeah. That was not done, but I thought it would be pretty for now. Anyways, so art and music and dance are ways that I help get that healing process out. Some people can heal through cooking food or through talking to others, just letting the feelings out. And yeah, it's hard. It's so hard to heal, and I am going through a lot right now on my healing journey of healing myself and healing a lot of the trauma and constantly trying to learn how to cope with it. And because life doesn't ever stop, there's always something that just keeps piling and piling and piling onto that. And yeah, so I just wanted to give a rundown of that. Let's talk about how to discover if your therapist is a good fit for you. That, every person's different. Every person's going to want something different. And I think that when you go into therapy, going into it, if you've never been to it before, it's scary. It is so scary to talk to a stranger about what's going on in your life and what you think and what you feel. That is like one of the hardest things, I think, to be vulnerable. And I don't think that we shine light enough on how strong it actually is to take the step into therapy and take the step into self-healing and take that step into sharing your emotions, because when we share our emotions, we are vulnerable. And if you're anything like me, we don't want to put ourselves in vulnerable positions. I think our society really pushes that on men too, that like men can't have feelings and they can't talk about them and that they can't, like, they have to be whatever. It's like, no, it is so strong, and I'm so proud of you if you're considering it, or if you're about to take that step, or if you're already in therapy, good for you. I think that I struggled to go back into therapy after losing my last therapist because of insurance. I couldn't afford her without it, and I lost the insurance. Because I am so afraid of getting a therapist who isn't going to connect with me and isn't going to understand and just be completely by the book. Like, I don't want to sit with a therapist who's 100% by the book. I want to sit with a therapist who understands the hardships of life. Granted, you're not really in therapy to talk about your therapist. But to explain that connection is my last therapist, she worked in the same therapeutic field that I did, which was wilderness therapy. And so she spoke the same dialect that we use, such as like, I hear you, I see you, and when you tell your feelings, like, she would often be like, oh, so I'm hearing that, let's say I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this happened at work and I was like so stressed out, and like, I can't believe Peggy and Susie did this and this and this, and then she'd be like, so what I'm hearing is that you had a lot of stress that caused a lot of anxiety, and it's bringing over into your today and afterwards because you feel for these people that you helped. And I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of like therapist that I want. And I also really struggle with, I don't want a therapist that is a male. And that's because I have a lot of trauma around men, and I just don't feel safe opening up like that to some strange man who, even if he has his degree and all of that things and experience, it just feels different. So I think that if you're looking for a therapist, you don't know what you want, try to sit with yourself and be like, okay, well, I'm going to be uncomfortable regardless of the experience. I'm going to be uncomfortable opening up and sharing. That's, but you're wanting that healing process, so you're looking into it. And you need to like really try to sit with yourself. What would make me feel better? A male or a woman? Maybe someone who specializes in LGBTQ things, and maybe a non-binary, maybe the gender will help. Or looking at, like, they have these like websites where you can go on and look at what they specialize in. Some of them are specialized in family relationships, some of them are specialized in things like ADHD, and some of them are, there's like different terms for it. Goodness, this is gonna be a long episode already. We're only like 12 minutes into recording and I cannot talk. I think that has a lot to do with, I do have a lot going on right now, but I also feel that it's really important to keep pushing this out, not even just for those that I'm reaching out to in this, but for myself too, to hear the things that I know that I don't always take in for myself. Where was I at? So, yeah, try to figure out what you think that you would want. If you're a woman who has sexual harm on your trauma list that you need to work through, maybe a woman from an opposite gender, because it can happen with both. Maybe a woman would make you feel better. Or if you're a man who has always struggled to communicate your feelings, maybe talking to another guy who clearly specialized in communicating your feelings could help, rather than that uncomfortability of like, if you're, I don't know, it just is really different for everyone. But I think that that's part of it, of finding the therapist for you, is trying to understand what you think would make you feel the most comfortable in an uncomfortable situation, because you're going to be uncomfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. You're going to talk about things that will probably trigger all kinds of emotions and feelings, and it depends on what level of therapy you're seeking too. Are you just seeking like to get better as a person, or are you trying to bring forth repressed memories? Because those are two different, I mean, they're both correspond with being and growing into a better person, but bringing forth repressed memories is a lot harder, I think. No, I shouldn't. I don't want to dismiss. Hold on. Let me just pause. The healing journey is hard. Period. Finding a therapist that fits you can be hard. Period. Okay? Like, these things are hard. You're going to be uncomfortable, but I'm so proud of you for wanting to, for watching this episode. Clearly, you want to better yourself, and that is fucking amazing. Yes. Fucking amazing. So, you can always find a therapist and be like, this one's not for me. Let me try another. That's annoying. It's the same as dating, right? Not that, don't, if you start to have like a romantic feelings for your therapist, you need another one. Don't do that. So let's say you don't want a therapist. You're not ready for that, or you don't think therapy works for you. Well, you could always, okay, let me think here. What do I want to say? I used to think therapy would never work for me. And I was brought up in a family where therapy wasn't normal. It was mocked, like, it was, I heard it in the community that I lived into that's white people shit. And that, to me, that kind of cultural mindset of any level of class, any race is wild. That we would put it in a box of that only belongs to one race or only belongs to one financial class. Like there should be therapy available to everyone, including people who don't have the money to pay for it and just different things. But I was against it. I was against it for so long. And then I was even against it in college. You know, I graduated college in 2019 and I've never once went to the therapy office. And, you know, I wonder, like, if that could have helped me. I definitely, I could have used therapy in college. I could have used therapy at any point in my life, but in college in particular, I um, relied a lot on dealing with my emotions through alcohol. And that was also part of my upbringing that on both sides of my family, but especially my father's side, that they didn't like to talk about their feelings and they often would use alcohol to suppress them, which, if any of you guys have drank, a lot of times if you get drunk, your emotions come out. So that kind of concept doesn't make sense to me, but yeah, that was what I grew up with. So I did the same thing. You know, in college, I would just drink away my emotions and including all the trauma, right? And so I kind of did a lot of work on myself through college because of people like Dal and Ryan. And we helped each other. We helped each other move through things, and I definitely had that mindset of like, I don't need a therapist because I got you guys. And I hear that a lot, and it's like, yes, that can help. And there's something beautiful that happens when you have someone who's studied the brain and how it works as humans and studied things like coping mechanisms and traumas, who doesn't know you and can only see everything that you're doing from an outside perspective. When they give advice versus your friends and family, there is no bias, you know, or at least it's not supposed to be. You know, some therapists, like with all jobs, some people shouldn't be in it, but there is no bias. You know, they're not gonna be like, oh, I had a lot of amazing humans to support me, and they would just let me drink. I also would fight it, you know, if people were like, oh, I don't think that you should do that. You should probably just like feel your feels. I'd be like, no, I'm gonna drink. And so it's as speaking from someone who rejected it for so long, who finally did it, and then worked in the field of wilderness therapy, it is so amazing for what it can do for you to have that outside perspective. But I've also heard cases if it's not for everyone, and that's okay. In college, I wanted to touch on that in college, when I found the dead body, which I have yet to go into that, and I will on one of the later podcast episodes. I just need to call, I want to call up my grandpa first to talk about some stuff so I want to put astro projection into that episode as well. So anyways, when I found the dead body, the school was really big on trying to get both me and Ryan to go to therapy. And I believe Ryan went, and I'll bring Ryan on, I think maybe the next episode or the following episode, and we'll talk about that, that whole experience and all that. That's going to be fun and interesting for people that didn't know that, or that went to college with us and tried to get it out of us then. I did not talk about it to a lot of people. But when I found that, or had that experience, the college really wanted both me and Ryan to go to therapy, and I refused. I refused because I thought that there's no way that somebody who studied the brain and like science of all that could possibly understand my spirituality and the fact that I felt like I was being that I wasn't traumatized from seeing this, but I was traumatized from the spirit that attached itself to me afterwards. And I was so like There's no way that this therapist is going to understand that if I tell her, well, no, I'm okay with what I went through, but what I'm not okay with is that the spirit's harassing me and I'm hearing voices essentially and feeling it and all that, and it pushed me and all that stuff, that she's not going to try and put me on a psych ward. Like, I just was so against it because I felt like there's no way that a therapist could respect your spirituality and be so scientifically brought up into that environment. I never gave her a try, so I don't know. But with this last therapist I had, my most recent one, we dove a little bit into the spirituality because, believe it or not, she had the White Wolf and Black Wolf book in her office. Like, there was a little children's book that they made the story into the book. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I talked about it in my previous episode, or 2 previous episodes ago, about the balance within yourself, essentially. That we both have light and dark that we have to feed. And she had the book. And I was like, whoa, okay, so I'm safe to talk about this. And so I shared a little bit about my spirituality, and she was like, that's your truth. Whether or not that's my truth, that is not for me to judge. That is for me to help you walk through your truth. And that is how you know you got a good therapist. If you got one that's like, I respect your spirituality, that is your truth, let's walk through this. Then there's the questions of let's go with the question of, how do I know I need therapy? Well, let's break down that question and what that means to you and what that means to me. So, how do I know I need therapy? Well, do you go through life questioning, it's so hard to answer that if I don't hear from one person. But how did I know I needed therapy? Let's start with that. Well, I have been sexually harmed against my will several times. I have been, I was raised by a narcissist. I was raised around alcoholics. I was exposed to drugs fairly young. I was, homeless at one point in my life. I had all the abandonment issues, all the trauma, or all the trust issues. I have control issues because of my upbringing. There's like so many things that I got to a point in my life where I was like, these are affecting my relationships. Like, I don't know why I am this way, but I'm going to figure it out. And then I started working in the therapy field, and through helping other people in a therapeutic mindset, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I have a lot of stuff to work on that I thought I worked on. And it can come down into like your romantic relationships. For someone like me, I really struggle with intimacy with men, being that I've been so harmed in so many different ways. And so that's a way that you would know that maybe you need therapy, to try and find a way to overcome that, so you're not having like panic attacks during intimacy or after. Like, again, this is me sharing my own stuff, and it's really hard still to talk about some of this stuff, because, like, yes, I'm talking to a camera and then I'm going to post it online for hundreds, eventually thousands of people to see. It's hard to put that out there. And I'm doing this and I'm sharing this because I want to reach at least one of you that's watching. More, great, but at least one of you, and like, help you figure out if you want the route of therapy or if you want to go in the spiritual route. We'll get to the spiritual route in a minute. I'm just really honing in on trying to help people understand, because I have my own friends and family in my life who aren't against it, but don't know if they could do it or don't know if they should. My brother, for instance, is super against it. I think everyone could have benefit from therapy in one way or another, even if you are like pretty far in your self-discovery journey. I remember like my second session with my therapist, she was like, she just asked me about she's like, just talk about whatever you want to talk about. So I'm talking about this, and I'm talking about work, and I'm talking about my relationship with my brother, and my relationship with my sister-in-law, my mom, and my boyfriend at the time, and all of this. And she's like, so what I'm hearing is that you put yourself in these positions to save others. You have a savior complex, and what do you do to save yourself? And I was like, damn. I needed someone I needed someone just to listen. Like, that's crazy that she just listened to me like rambling on about all these things, and she's like, you think you need to save everyone, but you don't. Save yourself. Do things for yourself. What does that look like for you? And things like that. And it's wild, man. It's wild. Yeah, so if you're wondering that, if you're watching this and you're wondering, did I just say washing again? Girl. Oh my gosh. So if you're watching this and you're wondering if you should see a therapist, message me and talk to me about like what would make you think that, and or if you have somebody in your life who you're curious about. You know, we all have some type of trauma that rooted from our childhood. Even if you had a really, really financially well childhood, that doesn't mean that you're mentally unaffected by it. You could have had the most loving and supporting parents and still develop something from that you might want to work through, or you don't. You don't have to work through it. You don't have to work on yourself. But, this is a channel that my whole purpose of this channel is to help others heal, as I wish I had for me, and in the process of doing that, I also continuously heal myself. Okay, so that's a little bit about therapy. Let's talk about spiritual healing. And I think that I definitely correspond, coincide. I don't know what word I'm trying. I definitely associate therapy with my spiritual healing, as I think that really helped me hit a notch of growth. However, it's been a long, like I said, there was a long time before I actually did therapy. So that spiritual growth for me was a lot of meditation, was a lot of yoga, a lot of painting, a lot of music, and a lot of projection of my desire to love myself onto others. And I was like, oh wait, that sounds unhealthy. Yeah, a little bit. It wasn't so much so that it was in like actual romantic relationships, but it was more of, I worked at a pizza place, and I would like write little notes on the boxes like, have a great day, you're beautiful, you're loved. I was projecting so much of like that onto other people because I didn't feel that for myself. And so my spiritual healing for me was to sit and find what I actually loved about myself. And I say that this a lot of time corresponds with therapy because they'll do the same thing in therapy. They will sit, if you want to find self-love, your therapist, if they're a good therapist, will give you ways to do that. They'll give you like activities, so to speak, of, okay, well, make a list of all the things you love about yourself and all the things you hate about yourself and why. And then, you'll sit and be like, one of the things that I used to really hate about myself was that I felt like I was a bad person for all the things I did in my teenage years. And part of the self-love process came from acknowledging that I wasn't a bad person for doing those things. That version of me was the version of a child who lived in survival mode, and reacted to it the only way that she knew how. And that was through like a lot of sexual behavior, and that was through um attacking men in different ways, like trying to break their hearts and stuff. And a lot of really unhealthy, not nice, not kind things. And for the longest time, I blamed myself for being an awful human. And there's a saying that I learned in the therapeutic world is that we are not responsible for our trauma, but we are responsible for healing it. And you can do that through spiritual work like yoga and meditation, or, going to church and praying to God, or asking for forgiveness and stuff like that. And like I said, I kind of correspond both because the therapy field kind of really helped me start to understand my different trauma responses and stuff. And if you don't know what a trauma response is, for instance, a trauma response is a way that a person will react in a situation based off of something that happened in their past and are not usually aware of it. So, for instance, here's a good one. Say you're in a relationship and you and your partner are arguing, and you just get to a point where you completely shut down and you just want to run away. And so you leave. You leave the conversation. Maybe you go out to a bar and have a drink, or maybe you cut the relationship off before even actually debriefing what happened. That is a trauma response to run away. One of my trauma responses is words are the way that people word things really mess with me because of my trauma. So it's usually a response of me to hyperanalyze them. And often I need someone to be very direct and being like, I'm not attacking you. I'm just pointing this out, and I'm wondering how we like move past that. And if I don't have the wording correct, I often get defensive and think that I'm being attacked, I'm being judged, and I'm being criticized for being myself because I grew up so much around adults and then teenagers and of my own age telling me that I was too much. And so that's comes from that. Yeah. So spiritual work. There's people who use tarot cards to help in their like healing journey. They use them to talk about like what's going on right now in their life, what's going to happen, how to get there. There are people that use like zodiac stuff, astrology. Astrology? Yeah, the stars and stuff, yeah. They'll use that to help guide them. There's so many different ways that you can approach spiritual healing of a damaged soul. And yeah, there's just a couple of mine. I would say that I prayed a lot to the creator in different ways for that guidance, for that help, and then it would come through myself and other people. And I think that because I think that everything happens for a reason, it's how I found the wilderness therapy job. That's how I hit the point of like, oh, I'm at a level to actually receive the therapeutic wording and not take it personally, and actually heal. Because I think, if I was put in therapy as a teenager, I probably wouldn't have been super receptive to it. That's part of the healing process is, can you actually receive the words of healing? The process of healing. It's hard and difficult, and it's hard to hear when you're like called out on some shit that you're doing that needs to be fixed. Like that shit can be hard when somebody's like, you're being toxic. You know. And I do think that we can heal a lot through other people, through conversating with them. But again, I said that I think that only goes so far, and that's what a therapist does, or that's what a spiritual guider does. There's so much that you have to do through others and alone, I think, on the healing journey, for sure. Discovering why, or discovering what needs to be healed, and then why. You want to figure out what parts of your personality are ingrained in you from childhood that you want to work through. So, discovering that from your childhood or a recent event and trying to figure out what's going on and why. And that comes with being in therapy, or having this self emotional awareness, like, oh, I get really sad every time my partner does this, and then it makes me feel, and then not makes me, but I am feeling this because of this. Like, recognizing I feel abandonment when this person does this because my father was never there for me. That's part of figuring out what what am I trying to say? That's part of that's part of discovering what needs to be healed, is being able to actually recognize your emotions and connect them with, oh, I keep feeling the same emotion over and over and over again whenever this action happens to me because of something. Not that, there's definitely times in our life where emotions are supposed to just be felt and not explained. And I think I struggle with that a lot because I was so invested in the therapeutic field. It is okay to just feel your emotions and not understand them. However, if you are trying to figure out, why do I keep ending up with toxic partners? Well, you're most likely repeating a trauma, or, yeah, a trauma cycle that you're trying to either fix, resolve those feelings from your childhood or from that event, or that you don't even recognize that you're in it. Because you're in fight or flight mode. And fight or flight mode is always triggered after some form of trauma or something that scares you or something like that. And sometimes we don't know. I would say sometimes, most of the time, you don't know that you're in it. You don't know that you're in it, and then you're stuck in it for years. I was stuck in my fight or flight mode until I was 24. Yeah, for 24 years. I would say probably around the age of 8 to 24 years, I was in fight or flight mode and had no idea. No idea. And that doesn't mean that you can't feel happiness in fight or flight mode. That doesn't mean that you can't, have a moment of relaxing in fight or flight mode, but because it presents differently in everyone. And for me, it was like I had to constantly go, 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 because I could not just chill. I part of that is, yeah. Anyways, looks different for everyone. So comfortability to me means no growth, and it means stagnicity. That doesn't mean that you can't ever be comfortable, because you can, like in your healing process you can get to a point where you're comfortable. Like I feel pretty comfortable with myself and my healing journey right now. However, I'm also incredibly uncomfortable in different parts of it. So I think if you're uncomfortable when it comes to facing your emotions and facing the things that have happened in the past, it will lead to growth, as hard as it is. There's a good book if you're trying to figure out understanding trauma and how it impacts us, and all of that. How it impacts, like, let me take a second. So I'm a big believer in mind, body, and soul. And this book that talks about how it's called The Body Keeps the Score. and I'll link it. It's talks about how trauma impacts the body and how we hold it in different ways. And, it can affect your digestive system. It can affect your nervous system. Like, trauma literally rewires your brain. And your soul feels that, mind, body, soul. So it rewires your brain. It affects your body in different ways, different health issues and all that. And I think for your soul, it can hinder it. It can dim the light. It can put you into a spot where you just want to hold it and never let anyone else touch it or see it. Never share your love with anyone in so many ways. And it's really sad, and it kind of really fucking sucks, but it's just part of life, and all of that. So another book to help you move through things like that is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And that talks about how our conditioning of being brought up, that we were conditioned to believe these certain beliefs and how you can overcome them. And how, like, he pretty much gives you 4 ways to, if you follow the 4 agreements of the ways that he gives, it'll help you to not take things so personal. Here, the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always do your best. And I think that he really highlights the healing, a way to move into a healing process of not even you don't even have to go into therapy, you don't even have to do all that, because he highlights the 4 things that really can help you live a lighter feeling life. So being impeccable with your words, which means you're always being honest and being meaningful with your words. And because words have weight, whether we're making a joke or not, if you tell someone that they're fat, that's going to put that on them, and therefore it's just, yeah. He does a lot better at explaining it than I am. Don't take anything personally. Wow, that would be nice to be able to do, right? That's really hard to do, but the way that he explains it, it makes sense. Like, oh, yeah, somebody comes up to me and tells me I'm ugly, they're just projecting whatever going on in their life or their upbringing to make them communicate that with me. It doesn't actually have anything to do with who I am or how I feel about myself. That is just what somebody else has projected onto me. Don't make any assumptions. You ever heard that assuming makes an ass out of you and me? Because that's how it spells, right? Right. It's spelled ass. Yeah, well, it's just, never mind. It makes an ass out of you and me, because if you assume that your partner or your loved one, your brother, your sister, your mom, knows what you want, but you never communicate that, and then you find yourself being disappointed, and then you're having those hardships of feelings and all that, and then resentment forms in different ways. So don't assume, ask. And always do your best. And that one is the best one, because your best is going to look different on every day. And different on every other day, Like today, I'm recording this podcast and I am so low energy because I am on the struggle bus of an emotional growing period. Yeah. In my journey right now. And I really was like, I can't record this podcast. I can't. And I was like, no, you can, because though you don't feel like you can do anything else today, what you can do is just be real and authentic and share what you know. And if it doesn't come off as super exciting and funny as the other ones or goofy, then it doesn't. It just, there's no one that I don't need to impress anyone. I just need to get the energy out there for people to heal, and that will be returned to me. So do your best and There's some days where you're not going to be able to get out of bed, and there's some days where you're up and you're like, whew, I can do anything. I'm Superman. Like, you know. He does have a fifth agreement as well, but I would not recommend reading that until after you read the four agreements. And the fifth agreement is be skeptical, but learn to listen. And I like that one, especially in today's world, right? Because there's so much on the internet that's not real. So it's saying, be mindful of what information people are sharing with you, but listen, because it's important for people to be heard, and that's why we share all of our information and stuff. So in doing that, you can really choose what you take in for yourself and what you don't. And like the biggest thing with healing is remember that this is your pace and nobody else's. And that's a hard one for me. I'm so impatient. People are like, she's a patient person. No, I have patience. I am not a patient person. And I think that sometimes I unintentionally push that on my loved ones in my life. And it's not fair to them and it's not fair to me because everyone moves at their own pace. And I just get in this headspace of like, I want you to be where I'm at right now. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. So everyone moves at their own pace and you can do it. Take your time. All right. That was the healing journey. Let's talk about what is trauma. Well, trauma is, I didn't look up a Google definition. I was just going to share my definition, my own personal thing with trauma. What is trauma? Trauma is an event of some kind, whether from a person, place, or thing that happened in your life that impacted you so significantly that it resides in your mind, body, or spirit. And that it was, I would say, 99% of the time, the trauma was not your. No, I'm going to say 90. The trauma, the action was not of your doing. So, someone that's involved in a natural disaster, that can traumatize you. Someone that's involved in a car wreck, that can traumatize you. Clearly, unconsensual relationships, traumatizing. Your parents can traumatize you. There's so much in life that we go through that can put a mental hold, a body hold, and a spiritual hold on you in different ways. And we don't always are able to recognize our trauma. Some of it's suppressed because whatever happened was so terrible that we can't think about it. We don't want to think about it. That actually happened with me. I didn't remember a lot of my trauma until after I left a relationship that was super unhealthy and realized that I had lost myself. The codependency was so bad that when it split, it was like something in my brain flipped and everything came flying for it. I forgot about all the things that happened to me when I was younger and they just came flying for it. I was like, whoo, I need to, gotta fix that or work on that because that was a lot. And, it's traumatizing leaving a relationship. It's traumatizing losing someone who passes away. It's really anything that impacts your mental, physical, or spirit so much that you're just impacted for the rest of your life from it. Something that you can never forget. I always say that trauma isn't something that you heal and it goes away. It's something that you learn to cope with the rest of your life. And trauma will look different to every person. And everyone will experience different things in their life that are traumatic. And to one person, trying to compare them isn't fair to anyone because everyone has a different life, a different experience. And where some people, it's not traumatizing for one thing, it could be traumatizing to somebody else. There's so much that we don't know about what other people think and feel and are going through. So, you know, with trauma comes triggers. And I think that became like a slang word, like I'm so triggered. Like, and I think that can be kind of invalidating for people who like actually have triggers of trauma. Like I'm triggered by loud noises. And triggers look different. They can be as extreme as like panic attacks and anxiety attacks, or they can be simple things of like the small things of like jumping at loud noises, or if somebody raises your voice, like it's just a trigger for you to like back up and like shut down. There's so many different levels of trigger and trauma. But just to remind you, you are not responsible for your trauma. You're just responsible for healing it if that's what you want to do. You don't have to, and that's okay. And if you choose to, I think that it'll help you move through life a little bit lighter. You won't feel so heavy, you won't feel so squished, so limited, and you won't repeat a lot of the same cycles. You won't attract the negative energy that your brain keeps repeating. Yeah. I'm going to talk about grief. Grief comes in many stages, many forms, caused from many different things. I think the number one thing associated with grief is the grief of losing a loved one, right? I think that's what most people associate that with. However, grief can also be associated with the loss of a relationship, the loss of a friendship, the loss of a belief. That one, I'm going to really touch on that one. And the loss of yourself, the loss of, a dog. Like, it can really, the loss of a job, that one too. So, the loss of a belief. What does that mean? Well, the loss of a belief, as in you could believe in a future with someone, and losing that can cause grief and even be traumatizing. Because when we devote ourselves to our beliefs and our belief systems, and having that taken away from you can be life shocking and life altering. It can be the loss of belief of spiritual beliefs. I lost faith before, and it can impact you in ways that are just wild. And if you don't recognize that it is grief, it makes it harder, in my opinion, to move through it. So with grief, whether it's dealing with the job, a belief system, any of that, or processing someone who's no longer here on this earth physically, there's different stages of grief. And grief it can come in different orders, but usually the first one is denial or shock, which kind of speak for themselves, that you're at a point where it's not true, there's no way it can be true, or you're like not acknowledging that the thing happened. For something like losing your job, you might still get up in the morning and get dressed for your job. Stage of anger, which speaks for itself. Like, it's natural that you're mad. Anger is often associated. Anger comes from our souls realizing that something isn't okay, that we're not like yeah, anger can be it's usually rooted in hurt and pain. And bargaining, which I don't know if I've ever, maybe bargaining, that one kind of was like, what's that? It's like you can make deals with yourself or the higher power in the hope that things will turn out differently. Bargaining involves thoughts such as, I will do anything if you take this pain away. This stage may come at any point within the grieving process. and guilt frequently accompanies it. So, like, I recently went through Hurricane Helene here in North Carolina, and I had serious, like, survivor's guilt, and often felt like it should have been me instead of those people who died. I wouldn't say that so much as bargaining, but there's definitely a lot of guilt, like survivor's guilt with that, and I think that that can kind of fall under line with that. Um, and then depression is a normal and appropriate response for a great loss of any kind. Symptoms include feeling empty and withdrawing from life, or feeling like you can't get out of bed even though you know you need to eat, feeling like it's hard to eat. Some people eat more when they're depressed. It kind of impacts different people in different ways. Testing, which this one, when I was like researching it, mind you, I've like have my own experiences, but I do try to give some research and Google definitions, so that it can kind of keep me on track, and then I don't give everything entirely from just my own perspective. Testing is a process of trying to find solutions that offer a means of dealing with loss. Someone may drift in and out of other grieving stages during this time. So I think that that's like trying to find the solution of, okay, well, I lost this person, so I'm just gonna put all their pictures away so I don't think about that, or I think that's kind of along the lines of that. And then acceptance and learning to live with the loss and acknowledging reality of it. It doesn't mean that the sadness and sense of loss will fully fade. I think that's really important. Let me repeat that. It doesn't mean that accepting the loss of whatever you lost means the sadness and sense of loss will fully fade, but rather you can allow sorrow and joy to exist alongside one another, so you're not consumed entirely by sadness. I think the thing about grief is that it moves at its own pace for everyone, and I think that we live in a society that pushes us to move really fast through life and expects it to be like a month process. Like, if you lose a loved one, such as your parent, it's gonna be with you the rest of your life. That's not gonna just go away. And you will get to a point where, yeah, you can probably cope and manage it, but you might still cry on their birthday. You might still cry every time you see a picture and feel that sadness. And I think that there's a lot of people that will dismiss grief if they have different beliefs or if they don't feel it the same. But we all feel and we all move through things differently. So, like for me, I believe in Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead. So for my loved ones, I have like an altar, and I believe that they come from the spirit realm to spend time with us and have a dinner with us. And for me, that's my way of being like, I'm okay with these people who've passed. I also recognize that a lot of people that passes when I was younger. So it is, I would probably struggle a lot more if I lost one of my parents at this point, or one of my friends or loved ones, than I did then, because as a child, you can't really, anyways, it's like you could develop some form of belief system that helps you feel better. Some people use the belief of where they're in heaven with God, and they can hear my prayers. Some people, like me, think that you can channel them and have them come visit you in your dream, and you guys can relive a memory together, or they'll just come and talk to you. You can go to, what's it called? There's people who can commune with the spirits, and they can summon their loved one. You can actually talk to that loved one through that person. There's all kinds of different ways to process the loss of someone. It's I don't think it's ever going to be easy, and the whole point of processing grief is that you're having grief because you loved or valued something, or someone that is no longer there. And moving through that is just, it's hard, man. It, they say that it gets easier. It just depends on the person and how you process and how you move through things, and it's okay. It's okay that if you lost, someone like your sister or your mom or a friend 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you still cry every time you see pictures, or you still cry every time their birthday comes around or their burial date. Like, that's okay. I just, whenever I come across somebody who's processing grief, I always try to like validate, like, yeah, it's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to still be sad. Um, I think that I always try to encourage, you know, feel those feels, man. Feel them. And um, there's only been a couple of times where I've come across people who like let those feelings completely consume them. And again, everyone moves at their own pace, and depression is real in grieving process. I guess my words of encouragement is like, for me, would this person want me to still be laying in bed and doing nothing if they were around? And that's how my brain works, but that's not gonna be how everyone's works. It's like a way of encouraging myself through grief and depression. Is, especially if you lose someone, would this person want this? Or would they want me to celebrate my life for them and with them? Um, and so that's just what I do for myself, and I don't mean to dismiss anyone that can't do that, because it's hard, and everyone processes their feelings differently, and it hits them differently. It depends on how much they hold on to that person, like how dear they are. Was that your best friend? Was that your person? Was that just your neighbor? And it also can be. I've seen cases of, this is going to sound insensitive and I don't mean it to be, but it loops back to different traumatic trauma responses. And I've seen people like victimize themselves of the loss of a loved one or a job or something, like a why me kind of thing. And it's that can impact the stages of grief differently and how you move through them and impact your life and all that. So I did want to share my experiences with grief. When I was younger, I did lose my stepdad, which I talked about in one of my episodes. At 8, I lost my aunt at 12, and I think my grandpa was around 16 or 17. Now, I was really close with my stepdad. I wasn't super close with my aunt, and I wasn't super close with my grandpa. But I wanted to share them mostly just because this is part of the podcast, is giving my perspective and my personal things, and how it incorporates into my daily life now. So, at the age of 8, I just remember the whole experience, which I talked about in one of the previous episodes, of him passing away and going to the hospital and all that. And then for the funeral, standing up in front of all these people I had never met. There's like a handful that I actually knew. And like them telling me and my brother and my mom that they're sorry for our loss. And like we had to give like little like speeches. And it's the first time I actually wrote a poem. I've been writing poetry since. And yeah, it was just like, it was a lot. And I think that's one of the places in my life where I started to develop this weird thing with funerals, which I'll touch on in a minute. And at 12, I wasn't super close with my aunt, but it definitely traumatized me because she died from melanoma cancer, and the cancer treatment, the chemo, really like impacted her. And I remember seeing her on her last days of like, she had like really crusted lips, looked like she hadn't had water in years, and no hair, and she wasn't there. I guess her body was still alive, but she wasn't able to speak. And I just remember seeing that and I was like, oh, I think that it changed my perspective on like cancer and chemo. And I'm not even going to like speak too much on that because that is such a personal and sensitive topic for so many people. I will eventually bring a guest on who's experienced cancer and survived herself as well. One of my close friends, and I think that would be the space to talk about all that. My grandpa, I wasn't super close to him, but I do all my childhood memories. He was really funny and goofy. And I think it was his funeral that really kind of brought forth what I felt when I was 8 at my stepfather's funeral, and then what I felt with this one, of realizing that I can't do funerals because I can feel everyone's feelings. Because I was like not super close with him, I wasn't like devastated that he died, but I felt devastation from other people, and then I felt relief from other people, and I didn't like that. I did not like that I was picking up all these like controversial feelings. Like, why are you here if you are happy that they're not alive, or feel relieved that they're not alive? I just did not like that. And then I watched as my family, well, I don't say my family, I watched as certain people, and then I watched as certain people like made the funeral that's supposed to be about this person about them. And that I think that they truly felt like they were honoring my grandpa, but to me, I just watched it as like, wow, you really have to make this all about you. And I also recognize now that that is probably, not probably, that is a thing of moving through grief, that it feels very like it's all about how you feel and not so much about like other people or about that person. It becomes very much self-centered because you're like, I'm feeling so much despair, like I have to do something, and it can come off that way. But I think it's just like, in particular, got itchy nose. I think it just, for me, it rubbed me the wrong way between the empathy feelings and then seeing the display of um, actions that I was like, do you really think that this person would want that? But again, to be some empathetic is like, oh, that's probably all they felt like that they could do to show honor and love for that person. Um, yeah, the whole concept of funerals for me, because of my experiences, and it's crazy that like I had 3 funerals that they have significance in my life, but aside from my stepfather, I wasn't like super, super close, and it's impacted me to the point where I'm like, I don't fuck with funerals of the way we do them in America. And I don't, if you do, like, that all more power to you. I'm sure that there's people out there who have truly beautiful celebrations of a life, but the ones that I went to, they just felt so, I don't know. It just feels like, I think with my belief system is that if somebody passes away, we should honor their memory and celebrate their life and talk about all the great things, and not make it so much about how much we miss them. Or, well, like, what am I trying to say? I think I wrote it down here. I feel like with funerals here, that there's greedy people waiting for the money that passes, right? And then like standing up there as a kid and everyone telling me that they're sorry for their loss, like that feels weird. Yes, we're all sorry for the loss, that's why we're all here. Shouldn't we just be like grateful to be together and grateful to have known this person and just talk about how beautiful they are? And maybe there's funerals out there like that, I just haven't been to one myself. And I find it so strange that we stare at a lifeless body, because I'm so spiritual, I believe that like the body is just one part of the spirit. You know, once you die, your body is there and it's supposed to decompose and all that. And your spirit's no longer in that body but can still be on this plane of existence. So to me, I find that whole concept really creepy and weird, and I'm not about it. Again, don't mean to offend anyone if you are. If that's what makes sense to you and that's what you need, go for it. It's just not something I would do for my own passing. And yeah, I've dealt with a lot of grief in losing friendships and relationships, and at this point in my life, the relationships ones, I think, and friendship ones have really been super hard points in my life to move through them. So in particular, I've had my heart broken so many times. I've had like soul shattering events, losing people out of my life who meant so much to me. And if you really, if you touch into your teenage years when your hormones are wild and you can't really regulate your emotions and can't fully understand what you're feeling, it hurts, man. It hurts when you like think you're in love with someone, or and then they're not there anymore. And I'm not talking about like, oh, we met each other, oh, I love you. I'm talking about like being with someone for a long time in high school and really being devoted to that person. And for me, like I think I've always been such a deep lover, because I craved that so much as a kid. I know that my parents loved me, but I craved the kind of love that I just didn't receive. Like deep devotion. I wanted my parents to be devoted to me. And I looked at my parents and was like, I'm gonna be the complete opposite of you. If I ever have kids, they will be my sole purpose. And I think that has a lot to do with my neglect from them. So it's transpired over into my relationships. And so I become extremely devoted to my partners. And when that's not reciprocated, it hurts my soul. It breaks my heart a lot. And I go through the stages of grief when a relationship that is truly, truly meaningful to me. Because we've definitely, you have your relationships where you like start to fall in love with someone, you're like, oh yeah, I love them. And then you realize, oh, I think I love their potential. Or, oh, they're a manipulative narcissist and presented themselves as something that they're not. I don't love them. I don't love their personality. I don't want anything to do with them. And leaving a relationship like that, when I left the narcissist, I did not go through the stages of grief, because I was ready to be out of that. I was ready. I wanted out of that and was manipulated into staying into it for so long, guilt trips and stuff. So I was ready. Whereas, you know, when I was in college and I got out of a relationship back then, moved back to Ohio, I had lost myself in that relationship. And so I was moving through the stages of grief for so many things, not just the loss of that person, but the loss of me. Like, I had to grieve myself dying and then had to rebirth myself and discover myself again. And that's a whole process. And then, you know, also grieve that person that I felt so deeply connected for. At this point in my life, I like recognized that that wasn't the person that I'm supposed to be with, clearly, or they would have still been together. And yeah, it's just like grief is crazy, man. I have only been let go from one job, and I definitely grieved that job, um, because I felt like I was doing meaningful work there, and the way that I let go triggered, it was definitely hitting a trigger trauma response of like feeling like I could open up and talk about things and then having that used against me. So it shapes your soul. And I think that, losing a relationship or a friendship is not easier. I don't want to dismiss anyone. Impacts your soul differently than losing a loved one, right? Because losing a loved, like deceased, like they die. Because when somebody dies, they're no longer physically here. And I think that when you lose a relationship, though you can still go through the same level of grief and the same level of hurt, they are still alive most of the time. Some people go through the double grief of being widowed or um what's the word for a man? Of losing their spouse. And then you have to grieve the relationship ending and the passing of a person. And that's something that I can't personally atone to. I can say from what I've witnessed as a child that it can leave you feeling the true meaning of despair. And I say this, and I'm sharing this information, what I'm about to say. Again, just a reminder that my mother is a wonderful and amazing person now, and I 100% understand why and how and what happened with my stepdad. Her grief was so significant because she believed that this was her soulmate, right? So we were grieving a belief that's dying, right? Your soulmate. We're grieving the loss of my stepdad who's passed away. She was grieving the loss of the life that we had because he was like, because of his income and where we were at. And just grieving all of that. All of it. And my mom hit a really, really low point and wanted to unalive herself. And she didn't want to leave me and my brother behind. And she didn't want to leave me and my brother behind. And so we were exposed to that. And in a way, she wanted us to go with her. My mom did not strangle us. She did not do any of that. She chose to drink and then take her bottle of pills, and all of us got into my stepdad's truck, and she locked us in there with her and with the car running and the garage closed. So essentially it would have been, like carbon monoxide poisoning. And, I've talked to her about this recently, not recently, like last year, but that's when she finally told me that it was like I just couldn't bear the thought of living without him and couldn't bear the thought of leaving you guys. So, but at the same time, if you look at the way that she approached it, like she was suffering from all of this grief, but she didn't shove any pills down our throats. She didn't try to drown us. She didn't do anything excessive, And I think that to a degree she knew that we would get out of it because my brother was old enough. So he was 10 and he ended up calling my dad's sister, so my aunt. And, my mom was committed and went through all the things, and she's a lot better now. I don't think she's ever hit a point like that in her life now. And I'm sure she's gonna have a lot of feelings about me sharing this, but I'm sharing it again because this is part of my personal journey and experiencing grief and seeing that loving someone so much could push you to the point of not wanting to live and not wanting to leave your kids behind as well is crazy. Crazy, not crazy that she's crazy, but like, damn, grief is hard. Losing someone that you love is hard. And that by no means is that okay, but I'm at a point in my life where I understand. I understand why my mom did what she did, and I don't hold ill feelings towards her, because ultimately all three of us we're alive and we're growing, and it definitely is a trauma thing. It definitely was a lot. It definitely, she says it's a mistake, like it was a mistake, but I'm glad that my mom is still here and that we are still here. And I just really wanted to emphasize that grief is hard. And if you're going through that, and as the holidays come around, like, it's hard and heavy. And I just want to encourage anyone who's watching this, who's contemplating or feeling those feelings of not wanting to live without that person, just to remind you, like, do you really think that that person would want you to do that, or to honor them by continuing to live? And it's something that can sound insensitive, but it can also pull a lot of people out of that really dark spot, because unaliving yourself is a real thing. I will attach a unaliving yourself hotline in the comments below. And yeah, grief is hard, and I feel a lot right now just sharing all this with you and talking with you guys, and especially because I'm um, grieving a relationship of my own right now. So though it's this person's still alive, it's a lot to have a belief about your life with someone and have that person taken away. And even if it's not romantic, um, it's a lot to lose someone like your sister or your dad, or it's just a lot. So I wanted to make this episode just to kind of touch on it and really emphasize that feel your feels. Your feelings are valid. It's hard. Life is hard. It's definitely even harder when people are taken from our life too early, too soon. I don't know if you can ever really prepare for that. Trauma's hard. Facing those things that happened to you that it wasn't your fault, people who hurt you, things that you had nothing to do with, that just you were in the wrong spot, the wrong time. This is the heavier side of the podcast that I want to share, because it's real and it impacts you and it impacts your spirit. You know, when you move through grief, it's hard to sit and connect with your spirit guides. It's hard to maintain gratefulness and gratitude. It's hard to feel like, yeah, I want to live life. Yeah, I love life. It's hard to feel those things. And it'll come over time, for sure. If you're moving through grief, it comes through time. You get to a point where you're able to want to live again. Yeah, so there's that. Whew, that was a heavy episode for sure. I'll probably split this into 2 episodes because I think it's going to be long enough. If you or know anyone who's struggling with grief, trauma, and healing the broken soul, feel free to comment, message, reach out to me if you want any advice or just someone to hear you. I'll definitely put some like helplines and stuff in there. I can only help so much, right? We have to help ourselves before we can help others. But I'm pretty good at directing those feelings and emotions for people. Yeah. So thanks so much for watching and for being here. And you are beautiful. You are loved. You're amazing. You're kind. You got this. We got this. We can move through life. We can continue to move through life even with trauma, even with grief, and healing our broken souls. And you know, is it is it in China, or I don't know? It's over in one of the foreign countries from the U.S., a different country than the U.S. Where when a glass vase or something breaks, they put it back together with gold to symbolize that even something that's broken still has value and can be put back together and still be beautiful. And that was what this episode's about. You can still go through something traumatic. You can still go through some serious grief and have those cracks of being broken from losing that person or losing that piece of yourself and still be beautiful. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that this helps someone and that yeah. I love you, love my supporters, I love all the people in my life, and thanks. Whew, damn. That was hard. But it's so worth it. Someone out there's gonna need that. Oh boy. Bye. Thanks again for watching.